the beans to brewing the beverage, the finer details of coffee craftsmanship are being appreciated now more than ever. With craft coffee culture on the rise, people have become increasingly curious about the secret to creating the perfect cup of joy. So now we are very happy to have with us Ms. Ganga Prabhakar and Mr. Pavan Hanbal, who will educate us on slow brewing craft coffee business. May I kindly request Professor Zacharias Joseph to do the honors about Ms. Ganga Prabhakar and Mr. Pavan Hanbal. Over to Zacharias, sir.
Thank you, Usha ma'am, and welcome back to the second session for today. So from wines all the way to coffee, something which is a very integral part of our lives now. I mean, many of us can't do without our daily cup of caffeine in the morning. Quickly introduce you to the two speakers we have for this session. Ms. Ganga Prabhakar was a marketing and advertising professional for 8 years until she decided to dedicate herself to coffee full-time with the hopes of changing the face of Indian coffee. A coffee marketer, self-taught roaster, coffee researcher, and experimenter, post-Harvard procedures, roast and blend development, menu creation, and personalized coffee experience are all areas of her expertise. She has also taken up multiple certification and courses on coffee quality, brewing, cupping, and tasting. Mr. Pavan Hanbal, on the other hand, is an engineer by profession, has worked with many MNCs for 9 years before entering the coffee industry, with experience in manufacturing, quality management, setting systems, standardization, and strength. He's also a self-trained coffee taster. He loves to experiment with coffee and is also interested in fun mechanization. Both of them are founders of Coffee Mechanics in Bengaluru. The mission of Coffee Mechanics is to offer great quality coffee to consumers and business, roasted fresh while providing sustainable prices to the coffee farming community. So with this, over to you, Ms. Ganga Prabhakar and Pavan Hanbal, on slow brewing craft coffee business.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mrs. Usha, and thank you, Professor, for such a generous introduction. And we're happy to be here today to talk to the audience about, a little bit of our learnings, our journey so far, and what we have done in the craft coffee business. So if someone told me, I'd be talking about the coffee business 6 years back, I would have laughed and said, but I don't even drink coffee. So, and now with, with past many years of experience, now we think we've learned a lot over the process. And I think, from what was a very awakening and enlightening learning for us, and we would love to share that with you guys.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. A little from my side, being the fifth generation coffee grower, I always had this quest that as a next generation, I need to add something to the legacy and some form of value, and that research has led to coming up with Coffee Mechanics. So let's start the presentation.
Yeah, so we have a little presentation so that we can take you through.
Are we audible, and is the presentation?
Yes,
visible?
loud and clear. You're audible,
Yes,
and the presentation is also visible.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's start by giving a good introduction of this craft coffee culture. So if a very easy way to explain this would be to explain the three waves of coffee, how coffee has come about from history and where it is today. So if you look at it, it can be broadly classified into three waves. I'll just move to the next slide. I think it's a bit slow on the presentation. I'll just. Yes. So the first wave is characterized by making coffee accessible to people. So earlier to this was sometime during 1800s, 1870s, when coffee was not very accessible earlier to this. It was an expensive commodity. Only few people had access to this. And in this wave, the main characterization was that it was made accessible to every household. Everyone could brew a cup of coffee sitting right there at their home. And so the main pioneers of this wave was the instant coffee, which is a soluble coffee, which was pioneered by Nestle, as we all know it. And even till date, the soluble coffees still form a big part of coffee consumption across the globe. But in this wave, the first wave, coffee was just considered as coffee and nothing more to it. It's just a cup of coffee. And this led to the second wave sometime during 1970s when with the advent of inventing of the espresso machine in Italy, which was it was a machine invented to make coffee within 30 seconds, because otherwise brewing a cup of coffee would take a long time. And with this machine came the coffee shops and the whole culture of cafe culture, where people come and meet over a cup of coffee. And this became more and more popular. And here you could see baristas or barmen who were brewing the cup of coffee, and they would interact with the customer and talk about the coffee as well. And this was made hugely popular by the brand we all know today, which is Starbucks. So they are the pioneers of this second wave of coffee culture. And here the coffee was mostly very dark roasted coffee, and the reason being to keep uniformity across the cafe chains. So when we roast the coffee dark, it loses its origin characteristics, and you can kind of get about a uniformity across the supply chain. And with this came as cafe culture became more and more popular, even the consumer palate started changing. They were looking for more than a cup of coffee. They wanted variations. They wanted to know more about the coffee, and that led to today's third wave of coffee, where it is appreciating the quality of coffee and where it is sourced from, who the farmer is, the origin of the coffee, which estate it was sourced from, what elevation it was grown. So getting into those finer details, and also giving importance to every contributor in the supply chain, especially the farmer. The farmer in the earlier two waves was never in the forefront. It was never spoken where the coffee was, or who grew the coffee, or what the farmer also got for it. So in this third wave, it was appreciating the efforts of the farmer, and also experimenting a lot in the processing in the farm, during roasting, as well as in the ways of it being brewed. So here you have variations in roast degrees, different roast degrees, not only dark roast, but you have medium roast, we have light roast. Then brewing was not pertaining only to like an espresso machine. So a lot of these manual brewing methods came into importance, like like brewing a pour over, or a French press, and trying out different styles of coffee, and experimenting with coffees and other making coffee related beverages, special beverages. So these are some of the characteristics of the third wave of coffee.
So yeah, we want to just take you through a gist of what really qualifies to be craft coffee, and just learning a little about what makes for a craft coffee. So when we talk about craft coffee, there are many elements to it. Like Pavan rightly said, that there is the whole supply chain that we look at, but essentially it boils down to a few, 4 factors that we've listed out here, which is traceability, craft roasting, and freshness of the product in itself, and how personalized can we make it for the end consumer. So all of this put together in a nutshell would make for a craft coffee. We'll delve a little deep into what exactly each of these mean, and what is that we really need as someone who's interested in getting into the craft coffee business, or who's in the hospitality business. What do we need to know more when someone talks about a specialty coffee or craft coffee business? So again, like we mentioned earlier, the whole supply chain is something that we look at when it comes to the new age coffee drinking. Starting with broadly categorized into 6 segments here, which is sourcing, which is the source of the coffee itself, the quality analysis, the quality that is required for it to be craft coffee, the knowledge of profile roasting, packaging that is required to set apart from the usual ones that we see otherwise, the brewing techniques, and coffee shops. We'll get further in detail into each of these segments to understand a little about how we will to get an insight about how we can understand this better when someone talks about craft coffee. Like we said, traceability is an integral part of the third wave coffee culture. So which begins with which we think there are 3 broad categories again. One being forming a relationship with the coffee producer. So how can we understand, as someone being in the coffee getting into coffee business, be it a roaster or be it a retailer or be it a hotelier, to directly form a relation with a coffee producer. And why I tell this is because each microclimate, the farming depends on the microclimate, the temperature over there, the kind of plant material used, the way the farmer's hand comes into play. So there are many factors that influence what the end result of how a coffee tastes. So it's that delicate. Coffee tastes like how it is taken care of. So essentially, that is why it is really important to build that relationship with the coffee producer. And why we say this is because we've over the years we've realized that only less than 5% of what we sell as a cup of coffee, less than 5% is what goes to a farmer. So what this makes us understand is that a farmer gets far way lesser than what he deserves, or there's not enough to fuel his innovation and to better the product. So in this category, we focus a lot more on fair trade. So what is required for his effort to be appreciated, and also to make the whole supply chain a sustainable one. So the idea here is to really benefit and to sort of give a fair appreciation to every part of the supply chain which adds value. And the non-value adding middleman is what we cut in this process. And the last part is also where how can we together, as someone who's facing the consumer, and on the producer side, how can we come together to give a better product for the consumer? So these are the 3 integral part of the sourcing. So where the common aim is to benefit each part of the supply chain, and also to give back to where to give back to each sector which contributes to making coffee experience better. Now, the second part is the quality analysis. Quality analysis really happens in different processes. So starting with post-harvest technique on the plantation, then there is dry processing, what we call as dry milling, and the third part is the coffee roasting. So I've put a small image of, I don't know how many of you have really seen a coffee fruit. So coffee is essentially fruit, and what we really roast is the pod that you see inside. So there's a cross section that I've put for everyone to view. The two pods that you see is what makes the coffee bean. So essentially, the larger fruit, it grows on a plant, and these are the coffee berries, coffee fruits that is harvested. So in the post-harvest technique, what we do in the craft coffee business is only take the red ripe berries. We only harvest the red ripe berries. So largely when we look at the, Pavan spoke about the first wave, second wave, and the third wave. So I'm talking about the third wave where we are harvesting only the red ripe berries. Whereas what was done earlier and generally is that the coffee is harvested all at once, the ripes, unripes, and the half ripes, so that when you, so that to make it economically more viable. Whereas in the third wave of coffee, we are focusing more on how the coffee tastes to the end palate, to a consumer. So when we harvest the red ripe berries, what it does is it's like any other fruit. When you have a mango, when it's red, or when it's fully ripe on the tree, or when you let it ripe fully and then you consume it, it tastes far better than a half ripe or an underripe mango. So that's essentially what we're trying to do in this sector. Not to say the others, the half ripes and the underripes go for a waste. So the instant coffee market usually consumes a large part of the commercial coffees, and it is essential for all these different segments to coexist to be able to make the coffee industry as a whole sustainable. Whereas in the craft coffee business, we look at only the red ripe berries, which makes for the 20% or 40% of the produce, which we are trying to increase slowly and steadily. So once we harvest these process in the post-harvest method, what we do is the fruit that you see in the first method, we dry the whole fruit as is. We put them on raised drying beds, and we constantly rake them with hand or with some of the tools to make sure that they are evenly drying and does not cause moldiness when we store them in a longer time. So we do not process it further. We take the red ripe berries and dry them as is. This method, we call it as natural process. So naturally harvest the red ripe berries and dry them as is, what is called as naturals. Now the next step is what we call as washed coffees. In washed coffees, we take these berries and we remove the top skin that you see over here. And we take out only the pods. You also would see that there is a certain amount of mucilage between the skin and the coffee pods. So in the wash process, we make sure that the mucilage as well as the skin is taken off. So the mucilage is taken off in the form of fermentation, which gives way to a very clean cup of coffee in the end result. So that is in the next step what we call as washed coffees. Now there is the third process, what is called as a eco-friendly way of processing coffee, which is in between these two, in between the natural process as well as the washed coffees. So we just remove the skin of the coffee. We use and we dry them on raised beds. They're usually stickier. So the end result of these three processed coffees in a final cup vary largely. So which is what make them unique. So as craft coffee roasters, our idea is also to present unique cups of coffees for the consumer to taste. So coming to the roasting part of it. So this is what we do as a post-harvest quality analysis. Here we eliminate all those. So even when there is a single pod present in a fruit, we remove them and eliminate as defects. So in craft coffee, every stage of the process, we try and eliminate coffees that don't fit and make it high quality coffee. So those ones that are taken off go into the commercial markets, commercial coffee segment. Now, when it comes to roasting is where again, the quality, needs to be controlled as well. So that brings us to the third point here, having the knowledge of profile roasting. So what does profile roasting really mean is in pre-craft coffee culture, the coffees were taken and just put into a heating machine, what is called as a roaster, and made the color to turn from the unroasted coffees would be green in color, and turn into a coffee seed that you see as a brown color seed. So that essentially there didn't really exist any science behind it. So which is what made it a very organic term of, heating something. It's like, putting something on a pan and without much thought, just, cooking it. So considering, all of you are, hospitality students and management people, in the business, I would think, this is where I can give you a reference of what we take a reference of. Profile roasting to something as basic as a caramelizing the onions. How you can change the same onions into a sweet caramelized onions to a burnt onion. So what we do in craft roasting is depending on what type of, how much of sugar content there is in the coffee bean. In the example that I'm quoting, how, what variety of onions are you frying, to how much heat is applied to turn it into your desired result. So that is exactly what we do to the coffees. So the intensity in which we apply heat would vary in profiling. That is what we call as profiling, depending on where the coffee is from, depending on its terroir, depending on its plant varietal, depending on how it was processed, what was that year's climate like, what is the bean really gone through. So all of these factors is what we take into consideration to when we are profile roasting the coffees. So even when we are profile roasting the coffees, elevation plays a huge role in the coffees. What is categorized again into hard bean and soft bean. So if you apply more heat to a softer bean, the chances that you burn it is far higher than when you how you do it to a hard bean. Hard bean is essentially a high altitude bean, what you would then take, and it requires a certain because of its construction, what is known as how the chemical compound structure is made of in the coffee bean. So once we've completed roasting, it really depends on how we then preserve it and how it reaches to the final consumer. So Pavan will tell us a little more about how the packaging really results in how the coffee really is handled.
Yes. So now we have this freshly roasted, profile roasted coffee, which is also of high quality sourced coffee. So now in preserving this freshness and the aroma, the packaging plays a huge role in this. So we would have seen otherwise normally on the in the supermarkets, we have some coffees which are packaged in just plain plastic pouches, which are transparent and which are also not airtight. And then we have also seen very sophisticated packing, which are almost vacuum packed. So I'll just explain what exactly the role of packaging is here. Coffee from the time of roasting, the freshness keeps degrading from the time of roasting. And when it's in its whole bean form, there is the freshness gets extended a bit. But when it's ground, it is, and if it is left open within an hour or within a couple of hours, you lose the freshness. You won't lose the taste or of coffee, but that zing that gives what fresh coffee brings to the cup, that is lost. So now, how do you package this? We usually follow a polypack, which is a kind of many layers of plastic, metal, kind of, which are sandwiched. So these polypacks are used, which is not transparent. So now light is also a deterrent to degrading the light also degrades the freshness of coffee. It changes the light and heat, both change the characteristics of coffee. So you need to protect it from light and heat. So that's why it's not transparent. And then fresh coffee also leaves out a lot of carbon dioxide. When coffee is freshly roasted, you will have a lot of carbon dioxide. And if you happen to pack, an airtight seal freshly roasted coffee, the next day you would see that the coffee pack would actually swell up and in some cases even burst open. So now, for this very reason, there is a one-way valve, which you could have, and especially it is used in the third wave of coffee, because it's also additional cost, and the other commercial coffees would eliminate this, value addition. So here, the one-way valve only pushes out the carbon dioxide outside the pack, but it doesn't allow the air and moisture from the external environment to get inside. So that way, the coffee is kind of breathing, but then it's isolated from the external environment. And one more aspect of the packaging is that the packaging has to be resealable. Now, how is it going to be used? It's going to be, you're not going to use every 250 gram or 100 gram coffee at once. So you always have to remove in small quantities, like 1 scoop of coffee to make a cup or couple of cups. So the package should have an option to reseal. So in this line, we see a lot of these tin ties and zippers, which are used to reseal the pack, as in when you have to store it back again. That is one. And then we also have the form and aesthetics of the packaging, which also play a big role. Aesthetics, of course, in terms of marketing it, or for your pack to stand out from the rest. So you play a lot in the aesthetic of the shape of the pack. And you also have variations like a stand-up pouch. Now, a stand-up pouch is used where it has the convenience of standing on its own on a shelf. So if it doesn't fall. As against that, there is also something called a gazette seal packing. So where the advantage of this packing is it's easier to compress and therefore requires minimal packing, secondary packing when shipping it out. So these are some of the aspects of packaging. Now, the next thing is the brewing technicalities. Once you have great packaged coffee, you have the coffee available, and how do you brew it? So just a little bit of science of brewing is that there are 3 factors which influence extraction of coffee. That is time, temperature, and turbulence. I'll further explain. So time is the time is it is the hot water contact or the water contact with the coffee grounds. How long? What is the time they are in contact? So the higher the time, the higher the extraction is. That is one. And coming to the temperature, same with the temperature. The higher the temperature of the water, the higher the extraction. But of course, in order to get a very sweet and delicious cup of coffee, it is recommended in this third wave coffee culture that the water needs to be no more hotter than 98 degrees Fahrenheit. So it should be well within that. And if you are actually doing it at home, nobody usually goes to measure the temperature of the water. So a simple hack is that you bring the water to boil and let it sit for about a minute. So it cools to that point, which is ideal for brewing. So with these three parameters, now if you look at all the brewing methods which are available, we have the French press. So French press is a immersion type of brewing where coffee grounds are immersed in water and nothing else is done. It's just immersed in water for about 4 minutes and then plunged. Then you have pressure extraction, that is mocha pot, where coffee is extracted with the pressure of hot water, steam over that. And then we have the drip filter, which even our South Indian filter falls under this category, where the gravity plays its role, where the water kind of mixes with the grinds, and with the gravity it starts dripping on the bottom container. So these are, and if you see these brewing methods, again, all the only variation is these three variables, that is time, temperature, and turbulence. And yeah, once these aspects are known, I think the most it all comes down to creating experience, a third wave coffee experience to the consumers. And even though coffee can be brewed at home, these coffee shops also form an essential part where a lot of communication, people get educated with that. So what is needed for this craft coffee culture coffee shop? I will not dwell on like the whole F&B kind of background, but then only focus on just the craft coffee setup. So you'll need a great espresso machine, which can consistently give out temperature controlled water. And also you need to choose a capacity based on what your peak hours traffic is, how many number of cups you sell at your peak hours, because based on that, you'll have to choose a machine which is capable of doing it. That is one. And then we need to give a broad choice of coffees to the consumer. So once the customer enters a craft coffee shop, he or she gets to choose different types of different origins of coffee, different roast levels of coffee, and also different brewing types. Now, espresso is one certain brewing type, which is the most common that we see in coffee shops. Whereas there are a lot of other manual brewings like French press, the mocha pot. Then there is this very uber cool brewing method which is getting popular, which is called AeroPress. These are all different brewing methods which are popularized, and having these options is very essential. And the most important part is the barista who is going to be brewing this coffee. He not only has to technically know how to brew this coffee, because you need to control the time, brewing time, the brewing temperature, and the grind size. So the barista needs to have these technical capabilities and should be well trained, and also good at communicating and understanding the customer requirement. It's like a bar where cocktail bar, where the bartender has the responsibility to recommend the right cocktail to the customer, because by maybe asking a few questions, by in way of understanding the looks of the customer and his requirement, his or her requirement. Yes, so that's on the setting of the coffee shop. Yeah, next we have where are these coffees, what are the channels where we sell these coffees, or the point of sales. So in this craft coffee, today's world, we all know that online retailing plays a huge role, and it's even more so applicable to craft coffee, because here one essential part is that to control the freshness. Now, in order to control the freshness, we got to process every order, once we receive an order. Unlike commercial coffees, which will be sitting on the shelves of supermarkets for months. Not that they they spoil in any way, but it's just that it loses its essence of freshness. So controlling freshness is very important, and that's where online retail forms a very important channel, where you have your own website. You can also list them in marketplaces like Amazon, Tata Click, or you can also have a model which is called drop shipping, where another website which actually transfers the order to you and then you process the order. This is one. And physical retail can never be, will never go out of fashion. So being placed in the right physical retail outlets where you attract the right audience. Because with craft coffee, having the right audience is also very important, because they are slightly more expensive than the other commercial coffees. And if one doesn't appreciate the fineness, then it wouldn't be for them. Yes. And then also coffee shops form an essential part, where people get to try different coffees and develop their favorites. Someone would like a light roast, or someone would like a mocha pot, or a certain coffee with almond milk or soya milk. So these are various options which are out there and which are trending at the moment. And coffee shops surely form integral part in showcasing them and spreading this movement forward. So on that note, I'll let Ganga talk further about the different types of products.
Yeah. So I think, in terms of products, it really is up to your creativity and how you come up with each of these products. So just to give you an understanding of how basic it could be and how creative you can get, and what are the different things that you can do as part of, as a craft coffee business, or just to be aware of what is out there in the market. These are all the newer things that is there, and of an overview of what we are doing. So like we said, there's different factors that we consider when we look at designing each of them, and based on our relationship with the farmer and how we see it, there are three factors again. One is relationship with the farmer. The other is the roasting technique, depending on what performs well on the roasting, on profile roasting, how they turn out to be after roasting. Then what does the customer really want, or what do they appreciate? So these are the three factors that we are looking at broadly. So when it comes to that, we have broadly divided it into artisan and convenience, as you would see on the screen. So the artisan sector, the roast and blends is something that that you see broadly across the range, when it comes to roasted coffee. Providing the consumer with different roast options, different single estates. Again, how, much like I would like to bring the reference of an industry which a lot more of you would be aware of, that is the wine industry. Like how we would have different single estates, giving out the flavors of that terroir or the notes of terroir. So that's exactly what's, it's very, very similar and comparable to, wine in that sense. So that is why we have single estates. And the blends is something that we create out of when we think what is a blend that a consumer is looking for, and something that could really work for their palate outside of what these single estates really are catering to. Single estates essentially are to appreciate the origin itself and the producer, and how the processing techniques. So this is a little on the hobbyist level is also, I would say it's like a collector's, collector's coffee, or it could also be you're appreciating each of these different farms and you're supporting them in that reference. Now, when it comes to micro lots is something that we do it for two reasons. One is to bring about a difference in the industry. It would be a product of that. or it could be something so small that has been done as an experiment, and it is turned out to be really fabulous, which is why we call it a micro lot. So it is only processed in a micro level. So most often what happens, at least with how we do our micro lots, is basically testing out how can we make processes better for the future days to come. How can we reduce water consumption? How can we make, in the post-harvest processing, how can we conserve water while processing it? So these are sustainable practices that we focus on, and most of our micro lots are a result of that. The other micro lot that I would like to also bring into reference here is something very collaborative. So what we've done with one of our micro lots is partnered with one of the India's single malt whiskey, a whiskey brand, and we've taken their whiskey cask to age the coffees in, just to see how it turns out to be. And we realized that is something, the influence of the oakiness of the cask, the tropical flavors of the pre-used cask, so of the whiskey. So all of this adds a lot of flavor into the coffee. Is a very porous material, so which is why it absorbs a lot of the external factors. So, and that makes for a very interesting cup of coffee towards the end of the day. So I wouldn't really say all of which taste exactly like coffee, but this is very experimental, and this is something like the limited edition collection. So, which is why it is called the micro lots, and it is very experimental. Now, when it comes to cafes, again, we experiment with different, how do we make it appealing for the consumers? How do we make them try out coffees in different ways that will really intrigue them? And how do we cater to a best version of, because coffee, we believe, is a perspective, and how do we cater to the best form of that perspective that they believe in? Because there is no right and wrong about coffee. That is one thing that we've come to agree. How do we make a coffee consumption a very enjoyable experience? Now, there is the other sector that I would like to talk about, which is the convenience sector. So the artisan sector is what I spoke about. This is when we have a lot of time, to brew, when we are able to, this is for a relaxed time. Whereas coffee is a everyday product. So what we did, we came up with a convenience segment. So here, you don't really, as a consumer, you're not really thinking too much, or let's say for hotels, it would probably be not a large enough market where people are appreciating as much as, as what we as coffee experts view it. But you still want to introduce a pack of good cup of coffee. So that is when we decided that there is a drip bag. So you just simply plug on a mini brewer onto your mug, and you just pour hot water, and you'll be able to enjoy a good cup of drip coffee. Now there is also cold brew, which is trending coffee phenomena across the globe. So you just drop, you leave coffee for 24 hours of extraction without contact of any heat, and the brew you get out of that is what is called as the cold brew coffee. We also have bottled versions of them, which is just ready to drink, and pour it on ice, or use it as a mixer to make your other beverages. And so these are the segments that is in the convenience sector. So which is easy to make coffee segment. Now the other favorite that we've seen among the coffee coffee industry largely is also coffee is a very giftable product. So it is something that people enjoy gifting. So as coffee merchandise and coffee gifts is something that's getting really, really popular. So we see this being appreciated in the hobbies segment, in the hotel segment, and it's almost like a it's it's like something that you explore and find out and discover yourself. So that is what our gift collection or the coffee kits that we curate. Now, now coming this, brings us to the fact you might be wondering, all of these things, some of you might be familiar with a lot of things that we discussed today, but also a lot of which is new to most of us. So who really is the coffee consumer? Who are we really targeting this towards? And, because it is also very important for us to have relevant audience. And, sometimes it might be too overwhelming or too intimidating for a lot of the consumers. So our attempt in every stage is to how do we make this less intimidating, because we don't want it to go the wine route, which it takes really long for people to, where they would think that, okay, maybe I'm, this is something that is not for me, or this is, not to really create an elite, perception. So this is really for people, everybody who wants to consume a product that is ethical and eco-friendly. So where a fair amount of what they spend on each bag of coffee is fair trade, it is biodiverse, it is sustainable and natural. So these are, a lot of us have been, over the years, we've seen this happening in the hospitality sectors as well. People appreciate natural products more versus artificial flavoring, because that is what a developed palate really is looking for. And with the growing, growth in the economy as well, we see a lot more focus on this segment. So, not really having to say that this is an elitist product. This is also someone who is, it is for the consumer who is very conscious of what they consume. Now, the second set of audience is also, again, there's a lot of overlap over here, but this segment of the consumer we see is a educated consumer. They are not somebody who you can really trick them into buying something, and this is not your one-time sell. Yeah. So so when we look at this segment, people who are educated about, who want to know where their produce is coming from, what they're consuming, who is producing it, who is the, face behind it, what is the story behind why they are doing it? Are they just doing it for, to make overnight sales and money? And, is that the kind of product that they are buying, or they're really interested in the story behind the product? So it is very important for you to for us in the craft coffee business to really know and understand and educate our consumers as well in terms of what are they looking for and what is that we are providing as well. So that clarity in the product is something that an educated consumer would definitely look at. Now, the third part of the consumer is also the discerning palate. Now, with the high demand in, the craft coffee culture, as we, by definition itself is about high quality products. So there is a lot of concentration here on how the, how biodiverse environment are you producing because ultimately we're talking about agriculture industry here. If you make things unsustainable for the producer, then what you're eating would not be same 2 or 5 years down the lane. So it is very important for us to give it back to the community, which is the producing community or the farming community, to make sure that what we eat still stays as as clean as it should be. And clean eating should never be a thing, because everything that we eat should be clean irrespective. The discerning palate again demands a high quality product. And how much of personalization can we really give to the consumer? If they are brewing a mocha pot, how is that we are personalizing it to them? By giving a mocha pot grind size, the grind size that is in effect used to make a mocha pot and not a French press. So that is what we talk about personalization when we which is the reason why we don't stock up on store shelves. And also, how many broad range of products are we giving the consumer to choose from? So giving them options of rows. So somebody might like, just like the wine industry that I was talking about. This is something that you guys would be familiar with. Somebody likes a white wine and somebody likes a red wine, somebody likes a rosé, and those consumers really know what they want. So similarly, in the coffee industry, more and more now with the options, with we giving them many options to choose from, we see that becoming clearer. So our job as being in the business also becomes a lot more clearer to what to suggest to which consumer, so that ultimately we're making coffee an enjoyable experience. So that comes to the almost the final segment of our discussion, which is the brewing methods. Like Pavan earlier mentioned, it really depends on the brewing method. Is again largely classified into 3 categories, which is the immersion brewing, pressure extraction, and then the drip brews. So immersion brewing is essentially what a French press does. So you're immersing the coffee in water and you're letting it sit there immersed for about 3 to 4 minutes before you pour it into your cup. So that is the immersion brewing method. Now, coming to the next one is the drip filter. Drip filter is something again which you would be familiar with. Is the South Indian filter coffee, which basically you're pouring water on top and letting it drip down to make the decoction. And similarly with the coffee machine, which is also drip filters, or the now what is popular in the third wave coffee culture is the drip coffees, where you use a filter paper and you pour in hot water and let it drip down to form your final coffee brew. The last or the third type of extraction, the third principle in which the coffee gets extracted is the espresso machine. So here the contact time with all of these methods, there are 3 elements, which is time, temperature, and turbulence. So here with these 3 vary depending on what brewing method you're using. So in immersion brewing, your contact time is larger. There is no pressure involved. So which is why, and there is lesser turbulence involved. So which is what makes it, which is a longer brew time. Whereas in the drip filter, it comes somewhere in between, where the contact time is, somewhere in between, and which is about 2.5 to 3 minutes. But there is a significant amounts of turbulence, which is when you pour the hot water. Now the pressure extraction is what the time is reduced, and you're just extracting coffee for about 30 seconds to 1 minute maximum. In the espresso machine, it would be 30 seconds. In something called as a mocha pot, it would be about a minute or so. So this is where the coffee is under pressure. It is extracted under pressure, which is what makes it, the time taken to brew is very short, and there is lesser amount of turbulence that is involved here. So which is what makes them, there is difference in brewing. So even if you take the same coffees and brew it in different methods, the outcome that you would finally get would be extreme, which would vary vastly. So which is what makes this a hobbyist category. So, we would say coffee brewing is really a journey. It is not to say that one is better than the other. So, what we need as individuals or someone in the hospitality industry or in the hotel industry is for us to really start experimenting with it, for you to know it firsthand. What do you like, and what for all you wouldn't, your parent wouldn't like what you like, or your sibling would have a different taste profile from what you would enjoy. it's something like saying, pasta versus pizza versus, a kebab versus something else. So all of us need not like the same thing. So which is what makes, it would be really, really interesting for you to get your hands on one of these brewers, try experimenting with them, really get to know what, experience it firsthand, because for me that was a discovery. And having come from a coffee producer's background, I was a non-coffee drinker, and this really intrigued me to explore coffee and see what more there is to it. And you will be in a better position to help or recommend to your clients, or to people who visit you, or at your workplace as well. So it's really a very a dynamic segment. So yeah, I would just say go ahead, experiment and discover yourself.
Yes. Mhm. So I think that's brings to the end of our presentation. I see a lot of questions out there.
I'll take the questions for you. Thank you very much for this really informative talk. Would you like to take a 15 seconds break? I mean, you have been speaking nonstop for so long, and it was really interesting to hear. Just did not realize how time flew away. But before I take up the questions, I have a maybe out of curiosity. Of course, you're from the coffee, your family's in the coffee business, but you have done your engineering, and Ganga was in marketing and advertising. Now,
Yes.
has this helped you in any way in what you're doing right now?
I think I would like to think it of like this. It's a journey. So present at the current day, what we are doing is still in its nascent stages, but we only can see a growth which is going to be very compounding in the years to come. And having been present in every part of the supply chain, right from the producing coffee, growing coffee, to roasting, and even to brewing it and creating an experience, a new experience in cafes. I would say this is going to get only popular, and we are at the right place right now.
Yeah, I think, to answer your question, Mr. Zokaria, it's more of what the industries that we were in, if that helped us. We would like to believe that it certainly did. I think in terms of what we got into, essentially, I was just looking at marketing the coffees that we grow on our plantations to put it out in the market. That is exactly how we discovered that when we started realizing that there is so much more to coffee than what we were doing in India, and it was in its very, very nascent stage at the time. So it did help us in. So me coming from a marketing background really did help us reach out to more people over there. And in terms of setting up the roastery, because it's a manufacturing unit that we have here, and with Pavan's prior experience in working in the manufacturing field and manufacturing setup, setting up processes, and so that is definitely added on to what we are doing. So we are really grateful for that.
Okay, I'll start taking the questions which is there in the chat box. The first one is from Mr. Frederick. What is the role of Coffee Board in India? Is there any training course that are available from the Coffee Board?
Yes, so Coffee Board came into existence prior to 1996. Coffee wouldn't, it was not an open market, and every coffee that the farmer grows had to be sold to Coffee Board of India, and then it would get marketed and exported from there. So they have been integral in two aspects. One is researching, because there is no private research entity which is really researching on what are the new varietals of coffee that can be grown, which is pest resistant, disease resistance, high yielding, better quality, better taste. So that is one. There is a wing of Coffee Board which is CCRI, which is into it, and the second part of it was largely to market Indian coffees globally, because almost all the coffee grown in India was being exported, and we needed marketing efforts, and that's where Coffee Board has its role. Of course, now coming to the question that do they have anything to offer for someone who's learning, they definitely have some brilliant programs. One such is Kapi Shastra, which in fact even Ganga had attended, which really gives you a basic view of coffee, and definitely they are a good place to connect with growers and also for exporting. But with this craft coffee culture, I would say for our personal journey has been mostly a lot of self-learning and that we had to go through, because this was pretty new. And this is still new, that it's not a kind of a mass concept as yet. So
yeah, I think there's also something called as quality management is a course that Coffee Board of India does,
a diploma.
A diploma course, and I think that is a very informative one, and we do have a lot of tasters and people who qualify to be quality
Professionals.
Quality professionals. So that's definitely a good course that they have. Apart from that, Kapi Shastra is something that is, if you're just starting off, if you want to just test and see if this is where your interest lies, it will just put broadly things into perspective. Me, when I attended it, it really gave me a perspective of what is available over there, because sometimes even if we know it, we tend to forget it for some reason, or it just doesn't even occur. So I think it's, if you're serious about getting into coffee, it's a good course to just go and attend.
Okay, I have a quick question regarding what you mentioned recently about the coffee beans. Now, my understanding is we are always dealing with two coffee beans, right? Arabica and Robusta. Are there other varieties, or do you have different subspecies of these two when you're dealing with craft coffee?
Yeah. So so essentially what happens is there are Arabica, there are plenty many within Arabicas and Robustas. So these are two main commercially viable species that is so far come to use. But there are also something called as tree coffee, and there are multiple other varietals that are not yet commercially viable. And Arabicas are the most sought after because of its delicate flavors and delicate aromas that it provides. Whereas Robustas have always been, a less or less superior, I would say, as considered earlier. But that's changing for us, especially with Indian Robustas, because India produces some of the best Robustas in the world. And it can be as close as, because Indian Robustas are usually Robustas largely are very robust and very like its name. And they're also very, strong, bitter, slightly astringent. So these are all the characteristics of the Robustas. But Indian Robustas are hugely different. Indian Robustas are a lot more mellower, and it can come to as close as an Arabica. And also because of the kind of practices that we follow on the farms, Indian Robustas, when you compare it across the world, Robustas, of India, the way that they are processed are far more superior.
Yeah. So there are about 300 odd species which are discovered, and especially in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is the birthplace of coffee. And naturally, in the Ethiopian forests, you find many species of coffee. But then what was commercially cultivated over the last many years from history has been Arabica and Robusta. And there is also another varietal which in the plantations you would see them on on the borders of every plantation. That is tree coffee, which Ganga mentioned. It's also scientific name is coffee coffee excelsa. So, but commercially available and most experimented coffee, and if you'd say superior in terms of taste and aroma, it's Arabica. And Robusta, definitely because of its heavy body, the bitterness, and it acts as a perfect blend with Arabica. And you would see that in a lot of coffee shops, even in Europe, where they blend Robusta with Arabica. Yeah. I hope that answers.
Okay, thank you. There's a question from Dr. Savana seeking more details about the health benefits of drinking coffee.
Yeah, so coffee has this compound. So one is it has a lot of antioxidants, which are good. And it's also present in other beverages like tea as well. But then the concentration of antioxidants are much higher in coffee. And it also has this compound called chlorogenic acid, which during roasting kind of reduces, but it's still present. And this, in fact, increases your metabolism, and a lot of people also it helps in weight loss and also in fitness. And coffee also complements with fitness, because a lot of fitness enthusiasts start their day with coffee, because it gets their body ready for the fitness activity. And there have been a lot of research and studies. You would see that every now and then on the newspaper, which says it takes, coffee extends your lifespan, and it lowers your cholesterol. There have been, but nothing too prominent. I think I would say in terms of calories, if you are drinking black coffee, it is almost negligible. Usually, when coffee becomes a problem is, of course, caffeine is slightly it's an addictive substance, and people tend to drink more and more cups of coffee. And when you have it with milk and sugar, that's when it becomes unhealthy option, because you're adding in a lot of calories into your body. But if you're having it black, and 4 to 5 cups a day is, I think,
yeah, even 4 to 5 cups a day is still okay to have. So even if you've seen in most of the dietitians, they give you 1 cup of coffee or 2 cups of coffee per every when they do recommend a beverage. So because it hardly counts for 1 calorie each. So I think the most amount of health benefit really would be to start off as a pre-workout beverage. That is something that we've seen work effectively, and I think there have been a lot of gimmicky and marketing and so all of this. But having all of that said, nothing is proven as such. So this is, I think, and there is a lot said about green coffee as well. So that again brings to Pavan's point, was where that is because of the chlorogenic acid that is present in it, which also carries most amount of antioxidants, and which in turns increase in metabolism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. This one is from Mr. Nilesh. Do you create coffee tours or coffee tourism experience?
Yes. So this we started coffee tourism about 3 years back, because we realized that when we started off coffee mechanics, it gave us a first-hand experience and connect towards consumers. So which is what we made. What we realized was people didn't know that even coffee was a coffee fruit. So having understood that, we realized that there's so much more that people need to connect with coffee, which is why we do conduct coffee tours. Anyone who's interested can just let us, contact Coffee Mechanics and let us know. We do take in people. We've planned multiple times with, we've planned to do it with, some of your team members itself, but nothing has worked out so far. So, but we would love to do it for an educational purpose, and we have been doing it over the past 3 years.
And coffee, just to elaborate more on the tourism, coffee tourism part, hospitality has always been in sync with the locality of coffee plantations because of the scenic views and the nature, staying in amidst the nature over there. And also the people over there are very hospitable. So in that way, in that aspect also, coffee tourism is complementing.
And considering, we want to bring in a lot of origin connect being in a coffee producing country, which is what we think is, the more exposure people who are on the in the forefront or the consumer get, the better it is for everyone else. So it helps in breaking a lot of myths in that sense.
All right. The next question is from Mr. Vijay Pant. It's a statement come question. In India, we do have good brands, but we still use the brand from our childhood. And the other part of the question is, do you have a preferred coffee brand?
Do we have a preferred
coffee?
Which brand do you prefer? Now, what's your favorite brand?
Okay. So to answer the first part of the question is that, yes, there is so much said about coffee, and we still use the brands that are, that we're familiar with on the childhood. That being significant in this in the south of India specifically, because we have been coffee drinkers for a while now, and the newer coffee culture is something that it's coming with a newer narrative. So to introduce this segment to someone who's already been familiar with what they have been having all their lives, for us to come with a new culture and introduce this to people and tell them, okay, this is you've been having your coffee with chicory all this while, this is wrong, and you should be having without chicory and without all of this, would be it's unlearning a lot of things. So what we are comfortable with is something that we've been familiar over a period of time. So I think that is one reason why we tend to go back to, and it's also a taste a part of it, which we have developed a taste for something that is familiar. So that part is something that comes from habit, and the newer culture of coffee is something here to stay. So, and I think this is when you're looking at newer segment of craft coffee culture, always I would suggest look at it from an open-minded view and go with a sense of wanting to explore something that you haven't been familiar with. An experience that you might be familiar and might not be familiar. So this is like, a whiskey tasting or a wine tasting. Some things you have experienced before, some things you haven't. So that is the other part of it. And coming to a part of where, what brand we prefer personally, we would like to say Coffee Mechanics, but, we're very familiar with our households, especially I didn't, like I said earlier as well, I didn't drink coffee because earlier to us starting Coffee Mechanics or learning a lot more about coffee is because the way that we understood and knew coffee was to drink it with milk and many other things. But predominantly in the plantation, it is not very uncommon to have coffees without chicory and without, we've always freshly roasted coffees, and this is a common culture across at least our region, the region that we come from, that is Chikmagalur. It is not very uncommon to find households using freshly roasted coffees for their everyday consumption. So I think that is one place that,
and we also have some favorites outside of India. If you take like coffees from Burundi, which have very unique taste profiles. And I think that was one of the coffees that we tasted early on, which had notes of orange. Orange and grapefruit.
So it's just a thing to, like I said earlier, it is something for us to experience something new. So that was an eye opener for us, which is we realized that there was so much more that we could do with Indian coffees, taking reference of an international coffee. So this is something that wasn't done before, and which we drew a lot of inspiration from. So I think taste as many coffees as possible. So you will just be tasting a different perspective. Sometimes you might taste the same origin, same farm, but you would see that they taste far different. So this is why it is called craft coffee culture. Everybody is bringing their craft to the table. So even if it is the same coffees, how it is roasted by different roaster would bring about a lot more change. It's like, you can take a reference of a chef. A same pasta made by multiple chefs would taste far different, or any other dish for that matter, be it a biryani or be it anything.
One question regarding this, what is the right way of appreciating coffee? I mean, should it always be black without sugar, or can I still appreciate coffee as I drink it every day, with milk and sugar?
It can be. So there is what we, over the years, what we have come to understand is there's no right and wrong way of having coffee. So it's all to the individual perspective and personal taste preference. So earlier on, we used to be very kind of snobbish in pushing the craft coffee culture, but then we realized, someone having a traditional South Indian filter who's also equally passionate about it, and they are very particular of how they want their coffee to taste. So in that sense, we have come to a point that we appreciate there is no best coffee. We can't put a finger and say this is the best coffee. It's about discovering every individual's taste preference.
Yeah, it's about finding what is right for you, what works for you. So, I think one way that we see ourselves enjoying it is there is no one way that we enjoy coffee. There are some times that we have a lighter roasted coffee when we feel like it. And then there is something completely indulgent, maybe like a Vietnamese coffee, or something like a cappuccino, a simple cappuccino on a winter morning. It's like, having cocktail versus just hard liquor. So there is every, you can use it as an ingredient, or you can use it as is. So there is, the idea here is to not make it so intimidating. We should be able to enjoy it the way we love it.
Yeah.
So that's
And
the only right way.
most of the time, what happens with black coffee is the brewing is not right. Traditionally, in the other older coffee chains which are around, they have tuned their brewing method to suit traditional taste profiles. So thereby, what is happening is the coffee is over extracted, or it's bitter, harsh. But in fact, if you actually taste a good black coffee and its sweetness, and you can really feel the sweetness of that coffee and the real coffee flavor in it. And actually, if you actually develop a palate, first few times it could be a little shocking without the milk and sugar. But then once you really develop a palate for it, then you'll start appreciating coffee like no other. So it's a whole different experience, but not to say that drinking with milk and sugar is not good. Yeah, it's how passionate you are about.
Yeah, and I think also, the first few times that you taste a coffee black, make sure that you do it the right way, and try and do it with someone who knows their coffee really well. Like we have some workshops that we do, a tasting workshop. So we just sort of, brew it in different methods. Or the reason that we came up with an experience center is because, so that you don't really, because these equipments are really expensive. So before you invest in an equipment, always go to a coffee shop, or, come to an experience center, buy that 1 cup of coffee and see if that's something that you enjoy. So that you don't really have to invest before you invest in a brewer, but invest in a good brewer that you would be using for a lifetime. So, and most of these brewers are like that. So if you have it once, sort of it stays with you for a really, really long time.
Okay, I've got two questions here from the same topic, actually, one from Mr. Elangovan and Ms. Vasundhara. Can you discuss some about cold brew, which is new to us, and also would you say that cold brew extraction is convenient as it needs a lot more contact time?
A lot more.
What is cold brew, and is it a convenient process?
So I think cold brew is there are two ways of looking at it. One is why we cold brew coffee and the convenience of it. So why cold brewing coffee is because we're brewing it without any extraction, any contact of heat. So what that makes is it does not brew the harshness of the coffee. It does not extract the bitterness. So some part of it involves there is a richer extraction because of the larger contact time, and you're just letting it sit for a really long time. So the extract that you get from that is fuller. Now the other advantage is also that the brewing time might be higher, but the shelf life again becomes really you can keep that for a 10 or a 15 days, or sometimes even if done well you can even store your coffees for over a month. But you cannot do the same thing with a hot brewed coffee, because hot brewed coffees is pretty much like you can imagine a fizzy drink, and you pour the fizzy drink in a cup of coffee. Except that you do, because there are a lot of volatile compounds involved when it comes to hot brewing, and these volatile compounds escape into thin air once you hot brew it, and it just lasts for about 15 minutes and then it goes flat. So your flavors are not fuller, but that can be captured in the cold brewing method, which is why the trend of cold brewing has really increased over the past many years.
The next question is from, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
The next question is from Srilakshmi. Coffee like Kopi Luwak, Black Ivory coffee have been in talk these days. What is your take on this trend?
So we look at it as a kind of a marketing gimmick. The Kopi Luwaks, even though they are the world's most expensive coffee. Basically, what's happening is Kopi Luwak is the civet cats. So they have a natural way of choosing the best, like any other animal will choose the ripest coffee and ingest it, and then comes the seed, in the poop. So the whole story aspect is quite interesting to tell, and especially it's popularized in tourist destinations like Indonesia. But the aspect of it that we don't agree with or endorse is that in Indonesia, these animals are caged and force fed. So coffee is not their staple diet. So it just happens to here and there eat coffee. So what is happening in over there is they are being force fed, and the poop is collected and processed and sold at very high rates. And one more thing, if you had to pick out naturally, like we have a lot of these civet cat poop, seen in the plantations. If you had to pick it naturally, it's very unlikely that you can catch it fresh. So what is happening? It's fallen in the ground for a long time, where a lot of mold develops, and mold is definitely going to spoil the quality of the coffee. So in terms of quality, it is, I would say, it is a very poor quality coffee. But the story aspect of it makes up, and it makes it an interesting story where tourists, very appealing to tourists.
Yeah, and also it's commercially not viable. So we would say, don't fall for it, because if you really have to pick, run after the civet cats and catch that coffee, it's never going to be, viable. So it's very gimmicky. So you'll be getting a poor quality coffee for a really
very high
price.
The next question is from Ms. Vasundhara. In craft coffee, are the beans monsoon?
Monsoon coffees again is what came into existence before the craft coffee culture was as big. So what used to happen was, because India used to ship out a large amount of what we produce here to many other countries during its journey in the ships. It used to, because of the monsoon winds on the Indian Ocean, they used to be exposed, and also sort of swell up. So that is what used to happen because of the lack of the storage condition that was there then. So that came to be known as the monsooning, and because people had already developed a palate for it, the monsooning process, India started processing it as monsooning coffee. So we wouldn't really say even commercial coffees are monsooned. So, but it is an Indian processing thing that is known across the world. Yeah.
Yeah. So even when craft coffee industry, we can see monsooning, because if the beans are of, like, say, specialty quality beans, and they are monsoon controlled, it's another variation that you're bringing about.
Yeah, it could be something of a micro lot, probably, is what
Yes.
would say.
The next question is from Professor Sushil. Hi, Ganga and Pavan. Can you tell us something about Cascara?
Yeah. So Cascara, as we were explaining earlier, I'd shown a bean earlier. So Cascara is nothing but the skin, or the skin of the fruit. So what we do in Cascara is, the red ripe berries are, again, when the ripe berries are harvested, we take out the pulp of the skin, and then again dry them evenly, so that there is that element of juiciness or the mucilage that is stuck in the skin. And that what's made it's like an infusion that you can use it as an infusion, just like the tea. So it is nothing but the coffee fruit skin, which is called the cascara. It tastes nothing like coffee. Please visit us and try out some cascaras. And you will be surprised to see that it gives such a fruity and very tropical, and it's a very different taste from what the coffee. It has nothing to do with coffee, basically.
Yeah, we've seen it taste somewhat like kokum and sweet tamarind.
Yeah.
So it can be made into a cold brew as well as a hot infusion, but you treat it more like a tea, like a floral tea.
I think we have time for one last question here, which is from Mr. Challaswaro. What are the challenges for coffee farmers, and how many months would it take from one crop to the end product, the coffee? It's the entire cycle.
I think in current times, it's very challenging for the coffee farmers. One is coffee is a annual crop. So all the efforts that goes in for those 300 odd days are harvested end of the season. So usually the season spans from November to February. The biggest challenges today is the labor workforce available. We are not able to get skilled labor workforce, and because of course, a lot of other opportunities out there. And earlier it used to plantations would see generations of labor workforce who would settle with each plantation. But now that's not the case. And since it is a very intensively manual work, and there is work throughout the year, and any of those timely work which isn't done will affect the yields. And so that's how it almost makes it not sustainable. That is one. And another one is, even the sheer inflation of prices over the last 20 years, If you look at the prices, what the coffee demands in the international market, it's still stagnating. Even 20 years back, it was somewhere hovering around the same price range for a bag of coffee, and even today it's somewhere there. Whereas the cost of production of coffee has significantly increased over the last 20 years, which is also making it very unsustainable. And in order to the practices, in order to make it more efficient, we need to invest a lot on mechanization of the farm, using a lot of tools, and we need to change the way coffee is grown, which again involves huge investment, which the industry is not ready for. So yeah.
The other part is, there's some of it are technical challenges like these, and there are also others, which is like the climate and untimely rains, and these are other factors that that the farmers might be just ready to harvest the crop, and there would be a huge downpour, and sometimes there are times in the last couple of years where we faced these issues, where we were not able to harvest the crop that was grown for year long. So that means that that whole year's crop you would have lost. You would have put in all your work in the plantation. You would have put in fertilization and manuring and the labor force and all of that. But ultimately, if you're not able to harvest it, again, you've lost out on that. So there are significant challenges in that area as well for the coffee farmers, which is why we urge anyone who's getting into the craft coffee business to work closely with your farmers to make sure that you have a good produce in hand, instead of thinking of it very transactionally, because ultimately this is the food product that we're dealing with, and it has to be dealt with very responsibly, be it with coffee or be it with any other agriculture industry. Yeah.
And about the time period from crop to
it is 1 year. It's an annual crop. Yeah, it's an annual.
We will have to stop here now because we are slightly short the time. Thank you very much for your time, insight, and also for sharing your knowledge with us. I will hand it over to Usha ma'am. Usha ma'am, you're muted. Usha ma'am, you're muted.
Sorry. Thanks a lot for a lovely session and very, I think, very knowledgeable about craft coffee. It was a new avenue for most of us, and thanks a lot for being here there. So yes, participants, switch on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us, Mrs. Usha. So it
Yes,
was
thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Yes.
Always a pleasure to have you with us.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for being here. Thanks a lot for your time spent here. Thank you.
We love the questions. They were quite good.
Yeah, very interesting questions even I was going through. Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, participants, are you ready? Yes. For a picture. Thank you. It's done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
a
very
lot.
much.
Thanks a lot. So, bye-bye. We will look forward for another session with you.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hope everybody enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity again.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. We look forward
nice
for
to have
more such sessions.
Thank you.